What would you do if one morning you stepped into your perfectly manicured garden and saw three little kids eating grass on your lawn? Not strangers, but your own children. That's the moment Alexander Reed, a black billionaire once celebrated as America's face of success, fell to his knees in front of his own mansion because three pairs of innocent blue eyes made him realize everything he believed about life was a lie. He could walk away, just like he did 6 years ago, or face the truth he's been running from, a past filled with mistakes, sacrifice, and a woman who once loved him enough to lose everything. But the question is it ever too late to make things right, to rebuild a love that broke, and a family that never had the chance to exist? This isn't just the story of a billionaire. It's the story of a man worshipped by the world, but brought to his knees by the eyes of the three children who carry his blood. You'll cry, you'll get angry, and you'll ask yourself, if it were me, would I have the courage to say, "I'm here"? Get ready for the story that made millions of Americans break down in tears. Billionaire catches triplets eating grass in his yard, and the truth breaks him. If you still believe in second chances, like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to witness is a miracle born from truth, redemption, and love. The morning in the Hamptons was as quiet as ever. The sun had just risen above the distant tree line, spilling pale gold light across the neatly trimmed lawns that looked like velvet. Somewhere far away, waves whispered against the shore, blending with the scent of hot coffee steaming on the wooden balcony. Alexander Reed stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in a silver-gray silk robe. At 42, he was the image of success, a black man with calm eyes, deliberate steps, and a voice that made people listen. From a boy who grew up in the rough streets of Harlem, Alexander had risen to become the CEO of Reed Innovations, a tech company on the verge of a billion-dollar IPO. But that morning, everything changed. As he was about to sit down in his wicker chair, something caught his eye. Out on the bright green lawn where his hunting dogs usually played were three small figures, three children. They were crouched down, picking grass with their hands and putting it in their mouths. Alexander frowned. At first, he thought he was imagining it. Maybe they were the kids of one of his staff. But no, their clothes were dirty, their hair tangled, and one little girl was barefoot, her tiny feet stained with dirt. He set his coffee down and started walking toward them. The sea breeze brushed past, carrying the scent of fresh grass and salt. With every step, his heartbeat quickened not from fear, but from something deeper, something he couldn't name, like he was walking toward a mystery waiting to be unlocked. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low and steady. "What are you doing here?" The children froze. The oldest, maybe 6, pulled the younger 2 behind her, eyes wide with fear. "We were hungry," she whispered. Alexander frowned again. "Hungry. You're eating grass." The smallest one, with pigtails, looked up and said softly, "The grass is soft. It's like veggies. Mommy says veggies are healthy." That innocent answer hit him like a blow. For a moment, everything around him faded. No waves, no wind, just the sound of his own heartbeat. Then he noticed it. Their eyes, all three of them pale blue, deep and clear like a lake, the exact same color as his. All three. It couldn't be a coincidence. His chest tightened. He crouched down, voice gentler now. "Where did you come from? Who's your mother?" The youngest, a curly-haired little girl, trembled as she spoke. "Mommy's working in that big house." She pointed toward the staff quarters behind the estate. Alexander turned to look and saw a woman in a beige uniform running toward them, calling out between gasps, "Zoe, Zara, Zadie. Oh my God, what are you doing?" Their names floated through the air like a strange melody. Zoe, Zara, Zadie. 3 notes in perfect rhythm. The woman reached them, gathering the children into her arms. Her face was pale, sweat on her brow, hands shaken. When she finally looked up at Alexander, she froze. Their eyes met. 1 second, 2, long enough for the past to come roaring back. He knew her. "Lena," he said, his voice low but sharp. She lowered her head. "Yes, it's me. These children, they're yours." She held them tighter, her voice breaking. "Yes. I'm sorry, they were just hungry. I was working an extra shift and hadn't fed them yet." Alexander looked from her to the children and back again. A thought flashed through his mind, dizzying, undeniable. He couldn't breathe for a second, because those eyes, those unmistakable blue eyes, were his. He took a step back, the ground beneath him seeming to sway. "Lena." His voice cracked. "We need to talk." She nodded silently. The yard fell completely still. Only the sound of wind moving through the trees, the grass swaying as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for the story to unfold. The morning sea breeze felt unusually cold. Alexander Reed walked across the wide front yard, his shoes brushing against dew-covered grass. Behind him, Lena Brooks carried the youngest child in her arms while the other 2 trailed close beside her. No one spoke. The only sounds were the soft scrape of her rubber sandals against the gravel path, and the wind rustling through the old pine trees. When the glass doors opened, the air inside the mansion shifted the smell of coffee, oak wood, and a cold sense of luxury filled the space. The 3 children clung to their mother, eyes wide and curious, as if they'd stepped into a different world. Alexander said nothing, just motioned for the butler to leave. He poured water, setting 2 glasses on the ebony table. "Sit down," he said quietly, but the tone was enough to still the entire room. Lena sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The children took their seats on the couch nearby, glancing toward her every few seconds as if afraid she might disappear. Alexander studied them for a long time. He didn't know where to begin. 6 years had passed long enough for him to forget her face, or maybe to pretend he had. But now, every detail, the way she held her gaze, the faint tremor in her hands brought back memories he thought had been buried beneath years of billion-dollar deals. He finally spoke. "You left the company in what, 2017? "Yes," Lena replied softly. "You vanished. No goodbye. I sent someone to look for you, but you'd left nothing behind." She looked up at him, eyes a mix of fear and pride. "Because I wasn't allowed to leave anything behind." Alexander froze. Not allowed. Lena took a shaky breath. "Don't you remember that night, the company's year-end party at the Bellington Hotel?" He set his glass down slowly. That night, warm lights, jazz music, a glass of red wine in his hand. He remembered feeling drunk on success, drunk on praise as the man who broke barriers. But somewhere in that haze, there was a moment Lena helping him upstairs, her voice soft, her hands steady. After that, nothing. Only the memory of her dismissal the next morning. His jaw tightened. "What exactly are you saying?" Lena, she met his eyes wet, but unwavering. "I'm not saying anything, Alexander. I'm telling you the truth. Those 3 children are yours." The air cracked like shattered glass. Alexander shot to his feet, his chair toppling backward. "What did you just say?" Lena didn't flinch. Her voice was steady now. "I don't want money. I don't need your name. I just need you to know the truth." The children looked up, confused, sensing the weight in their mother's words. Zara, the middle one, tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, who is he?" Alexander turned away, his hand trembling on the back of the chair. Every breath felt heavier. 6 years of his life flashed before him, the headlines, the board meetings, the endless chase for respect in a world that never fully accepted him. 6 years of proving himself only to learn he might have abandoned 3 children without ever knowing it. "That's impossible," he muttered under his breath. "You can take a test if you need to," Lena said quietly, "but I didn't come here for that. I just can't let them eat grass again." Her voice cracked on the last word, dry and thin as the wind outside. Alexander stared at her, the woman he once remembered only as a loyal assistant, now sitting before him. Thin and worn, her hands rough from work, and in that moment he realized he had never seen anyone stronger. He walked a few steps toward the window. Outside, the children sat silently, still watching their mother. A memory surged his own mother, kneeling before a white landowner when he was 10, begging for her son to be allowed to go to school. Her voice echoed faintly in his mind. "Don't ever let anyone tell you you're less than them, just because you're black." He closed his eyes. Maybe that was why he'd built this empire, climbing higher, farther, so no one could ever look down on him again. But standing here now, surrounded by wealth, all he felt was emptiness. "Lena," he said hoarsely, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" She gave a small, sad smile, proud but tired. "Because when I found out I was pregnant, they made me sign an NDA. $300,000, a confidential support agreement. They called it from your company's legal department." He froze. I didn't know anything about that." "I believe you," she said softly. "But what I don't understand is if you really didn't know, why didn't you ever look her question cut deeper than anything else?" Alexander said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Lena stood, her voice steady but heavy. "He'll go now. I just wanted you to know whether you believe me or not. They're your children, and they deserve to know who their father is." The children moved to her side, holding her hands. They didn't understand the words, but they felt the weight of the silence that filled the room. When the door closed behind them, Alexander stayed where he was, frozen. On the table, 3 small glasses still bore the faint marks of Lena's lipstick, the only proof she had ever been there. He sat down slowly, picked up his phone, and opened the photo he'd taken that morning. 3 children crouched in the sunlight, chewing on grass. He zoomed in. Those same blue eyes stared back at him from the screen. He didn't need a DNA test. He already knew. That night, Boston shimmered beneath a sea of lights. The glass towers reached into the dark sky, reflecting 1,000 cold fragments of the city. On the 46th floor of Reed Innovations headquarters, Alexander Reed sat alone, staring down at the endless trails of headlights below. Newspapers were scattered across his desk, bold headlines screaming at him, "Reed Innovations prepares for historic IPO, first black CEO in high-tech industry." Those words used to make him proud. Now, they only made him tired. His phone buzzed. The name flashed on the screen: Marcus Hall, his closest friend and COO of the company. Alexander picked up. "You're still at the office." Marcus' deep voice came through. Yeah, tomorrow's the board meeting. They want to hear your statement about the situation this morning. Alexander said nothing. He didn't need to ask which situation. The photo had already gone viral. 3 hungry children, eating grass in front of a billionaire's mansion. Marcus hesitated before continuing. Alex, be smart. People are waiting for you to deny it. Don't let this screw up the IPO. Alexander leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Deny it. Deny 3 children. You don't even know if they're yours. I don't need to know. I looked in their eyes, that's enough. Silence on the other end. Alexander let out a low, humorless laugh. Remember 2008. Marcus sighed. What about it? The day they kicked me out of my first investor pitch because they didn't believe a black man could build an AI company. I remember, Marcus said quietly, but you proved them wrong. Alex, you won. Did I? Alexander murmured. Did I win when I wore the expensive suits? Sat at the table full of white men, nodding just enough to make them comfortable. Did I win when I forgot the woman who once believed in me before anyone else did? His voice broke slightly. Maybe I built an empire on a foundation of shame. Marcus didn't reply. After a few moments, there was only the click of disconnection. Alexander turned off the lights. The city's glow spilled through the window, washing the room in ghostly silver. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo, his first startup team, a decade ago, smiling in a cramped garage. Lena was there too, standing in the corner, holding a coffee cup, smiling like the future was something she could see. He remembered what she'd told him back then. They don't have to believe in you. As long as you do, you're already one step ahead. He had forgotten that. Now, surrounded by wealth and recognition, all he saw were walls of glass gleaming, perfect and completely hollow. He thought of the 3 children, those clear blue eyes, that small, innocent voice. The grass is soft, like veggies. The words replayed in his mind like a haunting melody. A billion-dollar empire, a 12-bedroom mansion, and yet his own children had to eat grass. The next morning, Alexander walked into the boardroom. 12 tense faces turned toward him. The glow from the screens made their skin look pale, cold, calculating. The chairman, an older man with silver hair, spoke first. Alex, we need to handle this fast. The press is digging into Lena Brooks' past. They're saying she used to work here. Alexander looked him dead in the eye. She did. She was my assistant. A murmur spread across the table. A woman at the far end leaned forward, her tone sharp. Then you need to deny the rumors. People admire you because you're different, but this kind of scandal, a secret family, it could ruin everything. Different, Alexander repeated quietly. She shifted uncomfortably. I mean, you're a symbol, someone who broke barriers. Don't destroy that image. In that instant, he understood. There was no admiration, only performance. They didn't truly believe in him. They just needed their black success story to polish the company's reputation. Alexander stood. This meeting's over. Alex, where are you going? Someone called after him. He turned, eyes cold but calm. To see those children, I think they have more to teach me than any of you ever will. Rain was falling over Boston when he drove out. The sky was gray, the streets glistening under the downpour. He didn't turn on the radio. He just drove, letting the rhythm of the rain mix with the noise in his head. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, forgiveness, or maybe just the last piece of himself he'd lost along the way. when he arrived. Lena was standing by the bus stop, holding an umbrella over the three kids. They were laughing together, unaware that the world outside was tearing their story apart. Alexander stopped the car, stepped out, and walked toward them. Rain soaked through his shirt, chilling him to the bone, but he didn't care. The youngest, Zadie, spotted him first. "Hey, you're the man with the big green yard." Alexander smiled a real smile. "The first in a long time. That's right. And I think it's time I learned how to make sure the grass grows in the right place." Lena looked at him surprised, cautious, uncertain. He met her gaze, his voice low and steady beneath the rain. "I came to say I'm sorry. The Boston rain didn't stop until nightfall. The windows of the workers' quarters were fogged with steam, and the glow of street lights stretched into long golden streaks." Alexander Reed stood silently on the porch, his shirt still damp, watching the three children sitting inside the small kitchen. The old wooden table was chipped, and a dented pan bubbled on the stove. The air smelled of tomato soup and slightly burnt bread. Lena Brooks moved quietly around her children, every motion tired but graceful. Zoe stirred the pot with a spoon. Zara wiped the table, and little Zadie traced shapes on the wood with her wet fingertips. It was such a simple, ordinary sine so ordinary that it softened something inside him. He, a man who managed thousands of employees and signed $100 million contracts, had never known that the sound of soup simmering could feel this warm. He spoke gently. "Can I help with anything?" Lena turned, surprised. "You know how to cook?" Alexander shrugged. "I can learn, if you teach me." The answer made the kids giggle. Zoe clapped her hands. "You're really gonna learn to cook?" "Yeah, but I'm not very good," he said with a grin. "Might burn the whole place down." Their laughter filled the room soft, fleeting, but in Alexander's heart it rang like church bells. After dinner, Lena cleaned up while the girls sat on the couch reading. Alexander stood by the doorway, just watching. Zara looked up shyly. "Mister, do you really have a big house, like in the movies?" He smiled. "I do, but no one lives there. Doesn't that make you lonely?" He hesitated, her question catching him off guard. "Yes," he said softly, "but not so much anymore." Why, he knelt down, his voice low. "Because tonight I had dinner with 3 little angels." Zara laughed and wrapped her arms around his leg. Her hug was tiny, real, and warm, something no amount of success had ever given him. That night, after Lena tucked the children into bed, Alexander stayed in the kitchen. The rain had stopped, the night air hummed with the sound of crickets. He opened his phone and stared at his packed schedule meetings. Investor calls, interviews. It all suddenly felt meaningless. He typed a short message to Marcus. "I won't be in tomorrow. I've got something more important." Then he put the phone away and just listened. The soft, steady breathing of the children in the next room. The kind of sound he had never heard in his 12-bedroom mansion. The next morning, Alexander arrived early. Lena looked startled when she saw him carrying a basket. "I brought a few things," he said. "Milk, fruit, donuts, and some books." Lena smiled faintly, though her eyes still held caution. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he replied warmly, "but I want to." Zoe squealed when she saw the box of donuts. Zadie climbed onto a chair, her mouth smeared with frosting. Zara curled up on his lap with one of the storybooks. Alexander began to read, awkwardly at first, his voice stiff and uncertain, but soon it softened. The children leaned against him, their small heads resting on his shoulders, safe and still. From the kitchen, Lena watched through blurred eyes as tears quietly fell. Later that day, they walked together through a small park behind the quarters, the elm trees shading the path. He asked, "How long have you lived like this? Almost 6 years." She said, "I work here so I can be near them, but it doesn't pay much. Some days there's only enough for milk." Alexander clenched his hands. "I should have been there. No one told you not to be," she said, voice soft but firm. "The only thing I ask is don't pity us. We're okay." He stopped and looked into her eyes. "No, Lena, this isn't pity. It's regret, and I want to make it right." She didn't answer. A single tear slid down her cheek. That afternoon, Alexander took the children to a toy store. They ran from aisle to aisle, eyes shining like stars. He stood watching, his chest tight and full all at once. Zadie tugged his sleeve, holding up a dark-haired doll. "Look, it's like Mommy." He laughed. "You're right, just like her." Zoe pointed to a model airplane high on the shelf. "How much is that one?" "Not cheap," he admitted. "Then forget it. Mommy says toys don't have to be expensive." Alexander knelt beside her. "Maybe, but sometimes people need a toy just to remember they're still kids." He reached up, took it down, and handed it to her. "It's yours." "Really?" she gasped. "Really? But you have to share it with your sisters." "Deal." The three of them nodded eagerly. On the drive back, the car was quiet. Zara slept in the back seat. Zadie hugged her doll, and Zoe gazed out the window clutching the plane. Lena glanced over. "You don't have to buy them everything." Alexander looked straight ahead. "Lena, I spent 6 years learning how to make money. Maybe it's time I learned how to use it the right way." That night, when he returned to his Hamptons mansion, the house was silent. He turned on the lights. Everything was immaculate, perfect, but lifeless. He walked down the long hallway and stopped before a framed photo of himself accepting the Entrepreneur of the Year award. His reflection stared back, cold, proud, empty. He took it down, in its place. He hung a photo from his phone, 3 children eating donuts that morning, grinning with frosting on their faces. For the first time, the room felt warm. That night, something awakened in him, not from obligation, not from image, but from love itself, the kind of love that doesn't ask for proof, only presence. He opened an old notebook and began to write today. I learned to look into my children's eyes and finally saw myself looking back. News travels faster than any storm. By morning, the image of Alexander Reed holding 3 little girls in a toy store had spread across the internet like wildfire. Headlines screamed from every corner of the media: billionaires, secret triplets, 3 hidden children, and their billion-dollar father. Alexander Reed, savior or fraud. His face was everywhere on TV, on phones, in every financial bulletin. People argued online. Some called him a compassionate father. Others accused him of staging a PR stunt to polish his progressive black CEO image in a world still ruled by white power suits. At the Reed Innovations headquarters, the air was thick and heavy. Shareholders, PR directors, and lawyers filled the conference room, their tension almost visible. Marcus Hall spoke first. "Alex, we need to control this now. The press is digging up the old fire-in records. There's even a payment receipt, $300,000 from the company." Alexander said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the giant screen, playing a Lupin news report. The reporter's voice was smooth, cold. Merciless sources claim Reed once had a relationship with a female employee who later disappeared. That same woman has now reappeared with 3 children living in poverty. Is this the hidden truth behind the so-called model billionaire? That woman? The words echoed in his head like a wound reopening. Marcus lowered his voice. The board wants you to lie low. Let this blow over. Just make it through the IPO first, then handle it quietly. It's the smart move. Alexander looked up. Smart? Yes. You stay silent. They'll forget. Every scandal has a 3-day lifespan. A short, sharp laugh slipped from Alexander's lips, bitter as steel. Marcus, when I was a kid, I hid under a kitchen table while my mother's landlord called her a stupid black woman. I promised myself that if I ever had power, I'd make people listen. And now you're telling me to be silent? Marcus froze. No one else dared to speak. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioner, the dull heartbeat of a corporate machine. Meanwhile, in the workers' housing across town, chaos reigned. Lena Brooks was folding clothes when reporters stormed the courtyard. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved toward her face. What's your relationship with Mr. Reed? Are those children really his? Are you blackmailing him? Ms. Brooks. Lena clutched her daughters tightly, her face pale. Zadie burst into tears. Zoe covered her sister's ears. Zara just stared, confused and scared. The noise was deafening, an avalanche of accusation. Someone in the crowd yelled, "She's just after his money, trying to cash in on his fame." Lena's jaw tightened. "Come on," she whispered to her girls. "We're going home." But home was no longer safe. When Alexander's car pulled up, dozens of cameras turned his way. He didn't flinch. He walked straight through the chaos, his voice calm and firm. "I have no statement," he said. "I'm just here to pick up my children." Those 7 words detonated across the media within minutes. Every headline turned red. Alexander Reed admits paternity. The billionaire's secret family confirmed. That night, Alexander brought Lena and the girls back to the Hamptons mansion. They sat together on the long sofa under the warm, dim light. No one spoke. Only the ticking of the clock and the wind outside filled the silence. Lena finally broke it. "You shouldn't have done that. The media will tear you apart." "Let them," Alexander said quietly. "I've spent half my life proving I was smart enough, clean enough, light enough to belong in their world, but not once did I live as myself." He looked at the 3 children huddled together on the couch. They're the only ones here living honestly. No masks, no pretending. His voice cracked. "I don't care anymore. If I lose the company, the money, the reputation, so be it. I just want to keep the one thing I've never had: a family." Lena stared at him, torn between disbelief and pain. "But if they destroy you, who will protect them?" Alexander stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I will, by morning." The mansion gates were swarmed. Cameras, microphones, protest signs, chaos. Some shouted insults. Others snapped photos like vultures. A group of white family values activists stood across the road, waving banners, "Hypocrisy doesn't represent us." The iron gates shook under the weight of the mob. Security struggled to hold them back. Marcus called nonstop. "Alex, the board's demanding your resignation. Our stock's in freefall. We've lost nearly $1 billion in 6 hours." Alexander's tone stayed calm. "I know. You can't do this. Alex, you're burning down everything we built." "I'm not burning it," he said softly. "I'm cleansing it. Marcus' voice cracked. "You're losing yourself." "No," Alexander replied. "Am finding myself." That afternoon, his fiancée, Miranda Stone, arrived. She swept into the house in a flawless white dress, her face carved from ice. In her hand was a magazine cover that read in bold letters, "The Fall of a Black CEO." "You've destroyed everything, Alex," she said flatly. "You think people will admire you for this. They won't. They'll laugh. A black billionaire claiming his illegitimate children. It's the perfect American tragedy." Alexander looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe, but at least it's my tragedy." Her lips twisted into a bitter smile. "When the IPO collapses, I'm gone. I'm not tying my name to a fool." She turned and walked out. The door shut softly, but the echo felt like an explosion. That night, Alexander stood alone on the porch. Snow had begun to fall, late, silent, and pure. He lifted a hand, watching the flakes melt against his skin. Behind him, laughter drifted from the living room. Zoe and Zara were helping Lena bake, while little Zadie giggled at the sound of the mixer. Alexander smiled faintly. Outside, the storm of public opinion raged louder than ever, but in that small, fragile warmth behind him, he found something unshakable, something the world could never take from him. Love, raw, imperfect, and real. That snowy night had seemed peaceful, but peace, sometimes, is only the silence before the real storm. The next morning, Alexander Reed took his 3 daughters to a community center on the outskirts of Boston. He wanted them to dance, to paint, to have the childhood he never did. The girls were excited. Lena carried a small box of pastries, smiling as they walked together. The air was crisp, the snow melting, the earth damp and fragrant. For the first time in years, Alexander felt light. The weight of numbers, contracts, and status had lifted from his shoulders. But just when life feels calmest, fate often decides to test you. Midway through the morning, as Alexander and Lena spoke with the program coordinator, a scream tore through the air. Zadie's collapsed. Time froze. Alexander ran. Zadie lay motionless on the floor, her skin pale, her lips blue. Zoe clutched her little sister, sobbing, "She's not breathing." He lifted the girl into his arms, shouting, "Call an ambulance." Now Lena's hands trembled as she knelt beside them. "Zadie, sweetheart, open your eyes. Mommy's here." Alexander held her tight, her body cold against his chest. His thoughts blurred into a single desperate prayer. "Don't take her from me, please. God, don't." The ambulance raced through the streets, sirens screaming. Alexander held Zadie close, shaking. The paramedic's voice was urgent. "Severe hypothermia. We're heading straight to Boston Children's." Lena sobbed quietly beside him. Zoe and Zara clung to each other, terrified. Alexander whispered into his daughter's ear, "Daddy's here. Am not leaving again." Her breathing was faint, fragile as a thread. At the hospital, they rushed Zadie into the emergency room. White lights, machines beeping, the sound of panic behind closed doors. A doctor turned to them. "Please wait outside." Alexander stood behind the glass, staring through the haze. Her tiny body was covered in wires, a mask over her face, the heart monitor pulsing in steady rhythm. He clenched his fists until they bled. Memories slammed into him, the day he signed the NDA, the day he fired Lena without a word, the day he chose silence over fatherhood. Marcus arrived, breathless. "Alex, I came as soon as I heard. This is awful. Alexander didn't turn around. She's 6 years old. Marcus, 6, and she's fighting for her life because of the choices I made. Marcus' voice faltered. You're not a bad man. Alexander gave a hollow laugh. Then why does everyone else suffer for what I've done? He stared through the glass, voice breaking. I thought power meant control, but I was weak afraid to lose it, afraid to be laughed at, afraid to be less, and that fear made me lose everything that ever mattered. The ER light stayed on for 3 hours. Each minute was a knife turning slowly in his chest. Finally, the door opened. The doctor stepped out, tired but calm. She's stable. Pneumonia complicated by hypothermia. Well, keep her under observation for a few days. Alexander sank into a chair, hands over his face. He didn't cry, but his whole body trembled as though something deep inside him had broken and begun to heal. Lena sat beside him and took his hand. She's going to be okay. Do you hear me? He nodded. Yes, but I'll make sure this never happens again. That night, he refused to leave the hospital. He sat by Zadie's bed, watching her breathe. Outside, the city lay under a quiet blanket of snow. Inside, the monitors hummed like a heartbeat. He opened his phone. Every headline was about him. Fallen tech idol, billionaire's emotional PR, stunt resign or resist Reed, faces his final collapse. He read them all, then turned off the screen. Looking at his daughter, he whispered, You know, Zadie, maybe I've spent my whole life proving the wrong thing. He took her hand in his, rough and trembling. Tomorrow, Daddy's going to do what's right. When morning came, Zadie opened her eyes, voice small but clear. Daddy, you're still here. Alexander smiled through exhaustion. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. Zoe and Zara burst into the room, hugging the bed, and Lena began to cry. The air was full of something too raw for words, relief, heartbreak, and love. Alexander looked at them all and said softly, Today, leaving the company. Lena stared at him. What I've let the job control my life for too long. Now I want to control it again. He drew a deep breath, eyes clear for the first time in years. The company can survive without me, but my children can't. That afternoon, Alexander walked onto the stage at Reed Innovations headquarters. Cameras flashed. The world was watching. He didn't read from the prepared speech. He spoke from his heart. I used to believe power meant controlling everything, but real strength is letting go of what the world calls everything so you can hold on to what truly matters. He paused, his gaze steady on the cameras. I am resigning as CEO of Reed Innovations because I don't want to be the most successful man in the room. I want to be the best father in the hearts of 3 little girls. The room fell silent. Then applause thundered through the hall loud, long, and human. Some people cried. Outside, snow began to fall again. Lena stood waiting with the children at the steps. Zadie ran forward, arms wide. Daddy Alexander bent down, lifting her into his arms. He met Lena's eyes. They didn't need words. Cameras clicked, but this time he didn't hide. He smiled a quiet, real smile. That day, a billion-dollar empire fell, but a family was born. And for Alexander Reed, it was the first true victory of his life, the victory of a father. News of Alexander Reed's resignation spread across America in a matter of hours. The media, investors, the public, everyone was stunned. A black billionaire walking away from the empire he built. Right in the middle of a media storm, America had never seen anything like it. That evening, every major network dissected his decision. Some called it the craziest PR stunt of the decade. Others said this might be the most human moment in American business history. But while the country argued, Alexander sat quietly in a small hospital room. Zadie had just been discharged. A soft yellow light glowed across his face. Lena was making tea. The girls were huddled on the couch watching cartoons. No cameras, no reporters, just warmth fragile, real, and enough. Zadie sat in his lap, her voice small. "Daddy, why are people on TV saying you're bad?" He brushed her hair gently. "They just don't know the whole story. Sweetheart, then why don't you tell them he froze?" That one innocent question hit deeper than any accusation ever could. He realized silence wasn't protection anymore, it was surrender. If he wanted to protect his children, he had to take back his story. The next morning, Alexander called CNN. A live, unedited interview was scheduled within 48 hours. He wasn't coming to spin the truth. He was coming to tell it. Before the broadcast, Marcus Hall found him in the green room. "You sure about this one wrong word and they'll tear you apart?" Alexander adjusted his collar and smiled. "You know what I used to fear the most." Marcus frowned. "What people see in who I really am. Now I just want them to see me, not the CEO, not the billionaire, just a father who made mistakes and is finally trying to make them right." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then speak from the heart." The broadcast went live. Millions watched. The host didn't waste time. "Mr. Reed, are you just trying to clean up your image by playing the sympathy card?" Alexander looked straight into the camera. "No, I'm trying to clean my heart." Silence. Then he continued. "I used to measure my worth in numbers. I thought success could earn respect. But 3 little girls, my daughters, taught me a lesson no Ivy League school ever could, that love doesn't need to be proven with a contract. Only with presence." The host's tone softened. "Aren't you afraid of losing everything?" Alexander smiled gently. "I've already lost everything once: my mother, my love, my conscience chasing the spotlight. But now, when I hold my daughter's hand, I realize I've found it all again." The internet erupted. The hashtag and Reed Redemption topped national trends within hours. Clips of his words flooded social media. Love doesn't need to be proven with a contract, only with presence. Even the harshest critics changed their tone. Late-night hosts and news anchors alike agreed this isn't a story about a CEO anymore. It's a story about a father, and maybe that's what America needed to hear. 3 days later, Alexander appeared again, not on television, but at the Boston Community Center, where it had all begun. Hundreds gathered, no cameras, no press, just people bringing flowers, pastries, and hugs. A middle-aged man approached him, eyes wet. "I lost my son because I worked too much. Today, I see myself in you. Thank you for saying what so many men never dared to." Alexander didn't answer. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. On a small stage, he announced the creation of the Blackwood Family Foundation, a nonprofit supporting homeless children and single parents in the working class. "If my past mistakes can help shape someone else's future," he said softly, "then every scar was worth it." The entire room rose to its feet, clapping until their hands ached. That evening, Alexander returned to the little house. The girls were waiting at the dinner table. "Daddy," Zoe asked, "what did you do today?" He smiled. "I just told my story. And this time, people listened." Lena looked at him. her eyes gentle as dawn. You didn't just tell your story, Alex. You told the story of everyone who's ever been afraid to be seen. He paused, then whispered, Maybe that's my real job now. That night, he stood on the porch as snow fell one last time that winter. Behind him, the laughter of his daughters filled the house. Across the street, the faded sign of the old workers' quarters glowed faintly, the place where it had all begun. Alexander whispered to the quiet night, Thank you for giving me a second chance. To be a father, to be a man. The light from the house spilled out soft, golden, alive. For the first time, Alexander Reed wasn't afraid of the spotlight because this light came from within. Winter in Boston melted away slowly. The last snowflakes drifted down the rooftops and vanished as soon as they touched the ground. The wind carried with it the first trace of spring warmth. Alexander Reed stood by the window, watching the sky shift from gray to blue. In his hand was a crumpled little card, written in messy pencil. I love you, Daddy, Zadie. He smiled. There was a dried milk stain on the corner, but to him it was worth more than every contract he had ever signed. Life had finally begun to settle. The modest little house in the working-class neighborhood was now freshly painted a soft yellow, with a white fence and a patch of grass where the girls played every afternoon. No guards, no staff, just laughter. Every morning, Alexander made breakfast himself, pancakes, eggs, warm milk. Zoe sliced fruit, Zadie doodled on napkins, and little Zara would sneak extra syrup onto his plate. He'd pretend to scold her. Hey, who said you could break breakfast rules? And they'd all burst out laughing. Happiness, he realized, doesn't need to be loud. One afternoon, Lena sat in the yard, replanting flowers in an old pot. Alexander brought her a cup of mint tea. She looked up, sunlight glinting on her auburn hair. Thank you, she said. He sat beside her, his voice low. No, thank you. If it weren't for you, I'd never have learned how to live honestly. She smiled softly. You always know how to make it impossible to stay mad at you. He paused, then asked quietly, Do you ever regret forgiving me? Lena looked out toward the yard, where their 3 children's laughter rang through the air. No, forgiveness wasn't for you. It was for them and for me. I didn't want to spend my life trapped in anger. He nodded, eyes filled with quiet admiration. You're stronger than I thought. She shook her head. No, I just got tired of being weak. They shared a look wordless, gentle. Between the laughter of children and the scent of tea, something new bloomed, something tender, real, and human. Later that spring, Alexander took his family to Boston Common. People recognized him, but this time there were no judgmental stares, only smiles, handshakes, and nods of respect. A white boy approached, clutching his father's hand. I saw you on TV, he said shyly. My dad says real men don't cry, but I think you're right. Sometimes crying is brave. Alexander bent down and smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. You're a smart kid. Lena stood behind him, watching with a look that was both warm and distant-like, seeing something she'd long hoped to believe in. That night, after the girls were asleep, Alexander stepped out onto the porch. Lena followed, wrapped in a thin sweater. The spring breeze carried the scent of new earth. He spoke quietly. You know, I used to think I knew what success meant. Now, I just want to wake up each morning, see my daughters smile and know you're still here. Lena looked at him. Do you know what I was most afraid of? All those years, what that my girls would grow up never knowing who their father was. Now, I'm not afraid anymore." They stood in silence, the air soft between them. Alexander reached for her hand, not hurried, not dramatic, just two broken people learning how to stand together again. Time passed. Spring turned to summer. The Blackwood Family Foundation, founded by Alexander, began operating nationwide, helping hundreds of struggling families like Lena once had. The media called him a symbol of rebirth. He just smiled and said, "I'm not reborn. I just learned how to be human again." One evening, the family sat together watching an old video of the press conference where he'd announced his resignation. Zoe pointed at the screen. "Daddy, you look different." "How so?" "You look sad back then. Now you look like you." Alexander chuckled, pulling her close. "That's because now I have a reason to smile." Zadie tilted her head. "What reason?" He looked at his daughters, then at Lena. "You three and your mom." Zara laughed. "I knew it." Their laughter filled the room. Outside, the summer moon rose full and bright, its light shimmering across the glass. And there, in that little yellow house, Alexander Reed finally found peace not under the spotlights, but in the quiet rhythm of the people he loved. He had walked through darkness, not to return to who he once was, but to become who he was always meant to be: a father, a man, and a whole human being. Summer drifted by like a breath. Days stretched longer. Sunlight spilled gold across the little neighborhood, and the laughter of three children carried through the air like music. Alexander Reed sat on the porch steps, watching Zoe, Zara, and Zadie run barefoot across the yard, chasing their bright paper kites. He couldn't remember the last time life had looked this beautiful. Lena stepped outside, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "You're thinking too much again," she teased, half joking, half knowing. He smiled, taking a sip. "Not really. Just realizing this might be what I've been searching for all my life." She tilted her head. "What's that piece?" The sun dipped low, staining the sky an orange and violet. They ate dinner outside, a small wooden table, simple food, and a soft breeze weaving through their laughter. Then Zadie looked up and asked, "Daddy, do you love Mommy?" The question caught them both off guard. Lena froze, her spoon clinking softly against the plate. Alexander chuckled, trying to hide his surprise. "Where'd that come from?" "It's not weird," Zadie pouted. "All my friends at school have parents who love each other." Zoe chimed in, "You and Mommy laugh all the time." And Zara added proudly, "That means you're in love." The table burst into laughter, but beneath the laughter, Lena felt her heart tremble softly, but real. That night, when the girls were asleep, Lena stepped into the garden. The moon hung bright above, the air smelled of grass and summer. Alexander sat by the table, reading from an old yellowed notebook, his mother's. On one page, faded ink read, "Live to love, not to be accepted." He closed the notebook and looked up. "Can't sleep." She shook her head. "I'm afraid he'll dream. The beautiful ones never last long." He smiled faintly. "I'm afraid of waking up because I might lose what I have now." Silence. The crickets sang. The moonlight brushed their faces. Then he spoke softly, almost a whisper to Nina. "I think I loved you long before I had the courage to admit it." She turned, eyes wide. "What did you just say?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I love you, not because you forgave me, not because of the girls, but because you were the first person who ever really saw me. The light and the dark." Lena's breath caught. She heard her own heart beat, the rustle of leaves blending with it. I tried not to love you, she whispered, for years. Why? Because loving you means facing the past, and I've lost too much there already. He reached for her hand, voice gentle, then let me hold what's left. She pulled back, tears glinting under the moonlight. You don't understand. I had to learn to stand alone, to be strong enough for 3 little girls. It's not easy to lean on someone again. Alexander stepped closer, his tone low, steady. You don't have to lean on me. Just know that if you ever turn around, I'll still be here. Their eyes met years of pain, guilt, and love unspoken swirling between them. Then Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. No words, no tears, just 2 weary souls finally finding rest. The next morning, sunlight spilled over the yard. The girls came running out, shouting, "Mom, Dad." Look, the kites are flying so high, Alexander and Lena stepped onto the porch. 3 kites, red, blue, and yellow, soared together in the bright sky. Zoe yelled, "We won! Daddy! We beat the wind!" Lena laughed, glancing at Alexander. He watched the kites, then looked back at her. He's calm, warm, sure. She didn't say a word, but in her heart she knew some things. Even if they come late, still come in time. That afternoon, Alexander opened an old drawer and took out a small box. Inside was a thin gold ring simple, without diamonds, without flash, just a single word engraved inside home. He handed it to her. "I don't want a traditional proposal," he said softly. "I just want to say I've found home. If you'll stay not for me, but for all of us, then this will be enough." Lena looked down at the ring, eyes shining. She placed a hand on his chest and whispered, "You don't have to say anything else. I already know." That night, they sat together in the glow of candlelight. Zadie begged for a bedtime story. Zoe read out loud, and Zara curled up in Alexander's lap. Lena leaned against his shoulder, her smile peaceful and sure. The candlelight flickered across her hand. Catching the ringet gleamed softly, like a tiny flame that would never go out. Outside, the wind brushed through the trees, carrying the scent of grass and the laughter of children. A chapter of their lives closed not with pain, but with forgiveness, love, and the quiet beauty of ordinary things. Sometimes fate doesn't bring people together to make them perfect, but to teach them how to heal. And in the end, Alexander Reed was no longer the lonely billionaire. He was a man who had learned to love, to lose, and finally to come home. October draped Boston in gold. Maple leaves carpeted the walkway leading to the Blackwood Community Center, now beautifully rebuilt thanks to the foundation Alexander Reed had created. Outside, colorful flags fluttered in the crisp wind, and balloons swayed gently above the gate. Beneath a large banner that read "Happy 6th Birthday," Zoe, Zara, and Zadie music, laughter, and the scent of vanilla cake filled the air and atmosphere so full of love it almost pulsed with life. Alexander wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tailored suit, no polished tie. He stood in the courtyard, eyes bright as he watched his 3 daughters run in circles, frosting on their fingers, hair messy, cheeks flushed with joy. "Zoe, stay away from the candles," Lena called. Zoe laughed and ran faster, dragging Zara and Zadie along. Alexander knelt down to fix the ribbon in Zadie's hair. "You know," he said softly, "I miss so many birthdays. But from today on, I'm never missing another one." Zadie threw her arms around his neck. "I believe you, Daddy." When the music shifted, Marcus Hall appeared, handing Alexander a folded sheet of paper. "They're ready for your speech," he said with a grin. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Do I have to stick to the script?" Marcus shrugged. "Up to you, but maybe skip the stock talk no one here owns shares." They both laughed. For the first time in years, it didn't sound forced. The crowd gathered around a small stage in the garden. The autumn light spilled gold across the chairs, and a soft wind rustled through the trees. Alexander stepped up, microphone in hand. He looked out at the faces Lena, his 3 girls, Marcus, families from the neighborhood, even a few reporters who once shadowed him through darker times. He took a deep breath, voice steady, warm, unpolished but true. 6 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life, not because I lost a business deal, but because I turned my back on 3 little souls who only needed me to say one thing: I'm here. I used to think being a father was a duty, but I've learned it's a privilege, and not everyone gets a second chance to earn it. The crowd fell silent. Leaves drifted gently to the stage, glowing in the late sunlight. Today, I'm not standing here as a CEO or a man once celebrated in headlines. I'm standing here as someone who was scared, who ran, but who finally learned how to stay. To stay long enough to love, to forgive, and to be a father. He looked down at his daughters in the front row, 3 pairs of bright eyes, wide and blue, reflecting the whole sky. My children taught me that love isn't about fixing things with money. It's about showing up, listening, growing together. His voice softened. I once had everything, and I lost it all just to learn how precious the smallest things can be. And now, when I wake up and hear their laughter, I know I'm finally living right. A hush fell over the crowd. Somewhere, a woman wept quietly. Marcus lowered his head, clenching his hands. Lena stood off to the side, tears slipping down her cheeks, but her smile, steady and proud, never wavered. Alexander turned toward her and finished softly. "This isn't just their birthday. It's mine tooth day I became a father for the second time." The applause came like thunder raw, genuine. Zoe was the first to run up and hug him. Then Zara and Zadie followed, wrapping around him in a small, unbreakable circle. Lena stepped forward, resting her hand on his shoulder. Their eyes met, and no words were needed. From a distance, Marcus lifted his phone, recording with a grin. "If anyone ever asks me what a miracle looks like," he murmured, "he'll show them this." The party lasted until late afternoon. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, Alexander and Lena cleared the tables together. Zoe was telling jokes. Zara twirled under the falling leaves, and Zadie carefully sliced cake to share with her friends. Lena looked around the garden and said quietly, "You've changed so much." Alexander smiled. "I haven't changed. I just came back to who I was supposed to be." She paused, her voice gentle. "Thank you for coming back." He reached for her hand. "Not coming back," he said softly, "staying." On the drive home, the girls slept in the back seat, heads resting against one another, frosting still on their fingers. Lena leaned into his shoulder. Alexander drove slowly, glancing at the rearview mirror, 3 small angels framed in one perfect picture. He whispered, as if praying, "I don't need any more glory. Just let me keep this moment, and it's enough." That night, after everyone was asleep, Alexander sat in his small study. He opened his mother's old notebook and wrote one final line. "Love doesn't come to fill what's missing. It comes to teach us to cherish what remains." I've been given a second chance at fatherhood, and this time I won't lose it." He closed the notebook and set it beside a new family photo taken that morning, Lana, the girls, and him, all smiling in sunlight. The lamplight reflected softly across his face, peaceful, warm, and finally free. Because every beginning is born from loss, and sometimes a second chance doesn't come from miracles but from a heart brave enough to change. Sometimes in life, we lose what's most precious not because we never had a chance, but because we were too busy to look back. The story of Alexander Reed, a man who seemed to have everything yet failed to see what truly mattered: love, family, and presence, is a powerful reminder for us all. We've all made mistakes. We've chosen work over our children. We've stayed silent instead of saying, "I love you." We've walked away when we should have stayed. But the beautiful thing about life is this: it always offers a second chance, if we're brave enough to take it. Alexander once lived as a lonely billionaire, surrounded by success but hollow inside. It wasn't until he saw 3 innocent children, fragments of the past he tried to forget, that he understood true success isn't measured by what you own, but by the hearts you help heal. He chose to return, to love, to forgive, and in doing so, he saved not only his family but himself. This isn't just a story about redemption. It's a mirror for anyone who has ever been afraid to face their past. It whispers a truth we often forget: it's never too late to love. It's never too late to begin again. So, if you're hearing this right now, call the friend you haven't spoken to in years. Hug your child and say, "I'm sorry," or simply forgive yourself for the things you couldn't change, because that might just be your second chance. Thank you for being here, for feeling, and for believing. If you too believe that love and forgiveness can transform a life like this story, share it and subscribe. Let's keep spreading kindness, humanity, and the belief that no matter who you are or how far you've fallen, there's always a way to begin again with a heart full of love.